Hi there, you're watching Dukascopy TV. I'm Elaine Stenson. The Federal Reserve has proposed new liquidity requirements for large US banks that are aimed at helping them withstand a credit crunch and prevent another financial crisis. Bob Slade, Managing Director of FXDD in New York, joins me on the line now. Bob, what's your response to this? Do you think that this is absolutely necessary?
Well, what I think is when the Fed brought this to the attention, and they actually voted unanimously last Thursday to enforce these new liquidity rules. And I'll give you a couple of comments that I read. I read a statement from Fed Governor Tarullo, quote unquote, "Since financial crises usually begin with a liquidity squeeze that further weakens the capital position of vulnerable firms, it is essential that we adopt liquidity regulations." I think in his statement, and where I see him, his point is we've had a crunch. We saw what happened in 2008, and we saw that what happened was that liquidity dried up. And this is the main driver of what they want to do. They need to eliminate that problem. For example, according to for an unnamed regulator, the liquidity rules would hopefully ensure that in a crunch, banks would have enough U.S. government debt and other, quote-unquote, easy-to-sell assets on hand to cope with client withdrawals and to meet any other needs, at least for a 30-day period. And that's what they right now are proposing to do. If I'm answering your questions all too quickly, but I think that the need for regulations is worthwhile, as we saw what happened during 2008. And we need to make sure that liquidity and the gears don't stop running, which is what happened.
What benefits might we see?
I think the benefits that you'll see is certainly there will be a much more favorable, and not only in the United States, but this sort of goes worldwide with the whole global and the Basel programs that are being placed out of Europe. This is the benefit of not having such a nervousness in the marketplace if banks are going to be able to absorb tight credit situations. And if the world, yet alone the United States, can alleviate that, I think you'll have people feeling at least better and more confident in the financial system globally.
Bob, the US has been tougher on standards than regulators in Europe. Should banks in other countries be doing this also?
Well, as I said before, and you're right, U.S. banks have been shoring up their capital positions pretty strongly since 2008. So there shouldn't be any major impact, per se, on the banking sectors. And I know that with the Basel agreements going on in Europe, they're also looking for those banks to shore up. So yes, it does look like certainly the U.S. and Europe, and I believe China and other countries, Japanese, are also realizing that they need to make sure there's strength behind the capital. Because it didn't just happen in the U.S., it didn't happen in Europe. As you and I know, it hit the global world hard.
Fed officials estimate banks face a $200 billion shortfall out of the $2 trillion in high-quality assets needed in meeting the liquidity requirements. Do you think banks will face this level of difficulty, Bob?
You know, with the banks needing this $200 billion, and they do have till 2017 to meet these new requirements, which is actually 2 years before the new Basel rules will take effect. The larger banks should not have a problem meeting the shortfall. What I think you'll be more concerned is about, say, the medium-sized bank, the 50 billion-ish type of bank and stuff. They're the ones who are not as internationally involved, and they're the ones that we'll see having more, not difficulty, but will certainly have to go to other sources to meet these needs, both in the U.S. and I believe the same thing will happen shortly in Europe.
Okay, Bob Slade from FXDD in New York, thank you for joining me on the line today. And that's all from me for now, but the team will be back with more throughout the week. Bye for now.